Hi everyone, welcome back. Carrying on with some more homeostasis again today, looking at plant hormones part 2. So what we're going to have a look at is a Auxin experiment, which is quite a famous experiment that comes up a lot in exams. Some more hormones called Gibberellins and ethenes. And the last point we're going to look at is how we as humans can use plant hormones, especially in things like agriculture. So as always, grab some paper, grab some pens, and follow along with me. Three, two, one. I'm going to start off with looking at the Auxin experiment, which isn't one experiment, it's actually a collection of a number of experiments that we've done when people were sort of first starting out about plant hormones and their effects on growth. So as I'm drawing on the screen now, there are 6 experiments done under different conditions. The first one is our control. The plant was not altered in any way, it was allowed to grow under normal conditions, so the plant bent as normal as the auxin was able to sort of diffuse from the tip and gather on the shaded side and elongate those cells. In the second experiment, the tip of the plant was cut off, so this means the plant did not bend, and that gave us a clue that auxins are found only in the very tip of the shoots, and then they have to sort of diffuse down the stem in order to make it bend. The third experiment took that idea a little further, and they wanted to see, well, is it the tip being removed that affects the auxins, or would covering up so it didn't have light affect it? So they covered the tip in a bit of foil or something that sort of blocked the light, and the plant didn't bend. So that did prove that auxin is only found in the tip and it only diffuses down when there is a stimulus of light on that plant. The fourth and fifth experiments were sort of variations on the same theme. What happens is a little plastic disc was inserted, just sort of shoved in the top of the plants. One was on the left side and one was on the right side, with the light source coming from the right side in both cases. In the first plant, it didn't bend because the auxin was blocked by the plastic disc from diffusing down the tip and into those cells in the stem to make them elongate and bend. But in the other experiment, when it was on the right, the light still hit the plant and the auxin was able to diffuse down to the left side in the shade and make it bend. And the last experiment was very similar to the fourth and fifth, but this time the disc that they used was made of gelatin, which is permeable. Permeable, remember, means lets things through. So the auxin that was produced in the tip was able to diffuse through due to that light stimulus, and then the plant bent. In terms of exams, you wouldn't be expected to know all of these experiments by heart or know sort of the backgrounds of them, but because, especially if you're doing higher tier, examiners often like to link your sort of knowledge in one area with a new situation that you might be in, this one is an absolute classic. So if you see these strange diagrams with people doing strange things to plants, you better bet that they're asking about auxins, especially if it's paper 2, because that is B5. Okay, what we're going to look at now is the uses of other hormones. There's 2 that we haven't covered so far. One's called Gibberellins and one is called ethene. So let's have a look. Other plant hormones then, you have 2 that you need to know of as well as auxin. You have Gibberellins and ethene. We're going to focus on Gibberellins first. So Gibberellins are involved in a number of processes such as cell elongation. Remember, cell elongation we covered in the last video is where auxin gathers on the opposite side to the stimulus and causes those cells to elongate and get longer. So that makes the plant bend. So Gibberellins are involved in that as well. They're also involved in flowering and fruiting, so making flowers develop and making fruits develop and ripen. They're also involved in something called seed dormancy. Now, dormancy is a posh science word for sleeping or sort of lying in wait. Take an example of a seed that's fallen from an oak tree, for example. You can't guarantee that seed's going to have the absolute right conditions it needs for growth when it's originally dropped from the tree. So seeds will often lie dormant and wait for the right conditions before they sprout in the spring, for example. The other one is ethene then. Ethene is involved in a number of processes as well. It's involved in dropping of leaves, especially in autumn where they all turn to beautiful colours of red and yellow and orange. It's my favourite time of year by far because it's so beautiful. It's also involved in flower opening, either opening flowers at night if they are pollinated by things like moths, or opening them in the daytime. And last one, my favourite in a weird way, is ethene is involved in fruit ripening. Now you can see this happening in action, and it's probably the bane of your life. I know it's the bane of mine. If you have bananas and you put them in your fruit bowl with other fruit, chances are you've noticed that your other fruit often goes mouldy faster or goes rotten faster, especially where it's been touching the bananas. This is because bananas and other rotten fruit produce a lot of this hormone ethene, and this hormone can diffuse into the air around the fruit, and if other plants come into contact with it, then be prompted to sort of finish their life cycle and then start to die. So often you'll find wherever the banana's been touching on the other fruit is where it goes rotten first. So easiest thing you can do to avoid this is to keep your bananas in a separate bowl. Right, so that's gibberellins and ethene. Let's have a look at how all of these three hormones are used, especially in agriculture. Our first use of plant hormones is in something called selective weed killer. Now, weeds are plants that you just don't want to have wherever you're growing. So not all plants are weeds, but all weeds can be plants. So how selective weed killer works is only plants with broad, wide leaves are affected. So if we compare something like grass and dandelions, often you'll have a grass lawn that you want to keep pristine, but those flipping dandelions keep sprouting up no matter how many times you go out with your trowel and dig them up. So what happens if you spray selective weed killer that contains auxin, because the grass has a small surface area for each leaf, they're long and thin, and dandelions have very large, wide leaves. When the auxin is sprayed, or when the weed killer is sprayed rather, the larger leaves get a larger dose, so represented by the pink dots. So any plants with large broad leaves get a lethal dose of this weed killer, so their cells grow out of control or they die. But the grass is unaffected. So that means you can spray your whole lawn and it will only kill plants that you don't want. So it's a bit more cost effective, especially if you're, say, a groundskeeper or you work with lots of astroturf and you do not want any weeds. Another use for the hormone auxin is in something called rooting powder, which is often used in agriculture and household gardening. So what you do is, say you've got a prize running rose bush in your garden and you're very proud of it, and you either want to start selling the roses because people tell you they are so beautiful, or you want to start showing them off to other people, give them as gifts. You don't want to start hacking and slashing at your own plant until you have nothing left from yourself. So what you want to do is grow them, their own versions of your beautiful plant. What you do is you cut the stem, you take that stem and you dip it into something called rooting powder, which contains the hormone auxin. Then you take that stem that's been dipped and you plant the whole stem into some soil, and then in a sort of number of days to weeks, depending on the powder and the conditions, that end of that stem will start to grow roots, and then it will grow into a completely whole new big plant eventually that you can then sell or give to others. This copy is a clone, so that just means in terms of biology that it has an exact matching copy of DNA compared to the original. They might not look exactly the same due to environmental factors such as the nutrients they're grown in, the amount of sunlight they get, but if you were to look down at the DNA, it would be exactly the same. Another use for auxin is in something called tissue culture, which works similarly to plant cuttings, but you're doing it on a much, much larger scale. So let's think of a world where you've discovered chocolate flavoured broccoli. It's broccoli, but it tastes just like a piece of dairy milk, or insert your favourite chocolate here, and you think, bloody hell, I'm going to get rich. If I manage to sell this, not only will we get children to eat more vegetables, I will be minted for life. So what you would do, because you want to grow them on a very large scale, is take some cells or take a small amount of tissue from your chocolate flavoured broccoli plant. You would then put them into a growth medium, so it could be a gel or a fluid, which contains the auxin, which will promote those cells to grow. You then wait to give them time to grow, and then what happens is you end up in your little petri dish, for example, you would have little green growths called plantlets. So those cells, because of the auxin, will have been stimulated to start to grow and develop. into little mini broccolis. Then what you could do is take those plantlets, or take the strongest plantlets, and then put those into little propagation trays. So that, you know, the little trays you see if you like gardening, that have all the little spaces for your little plant seeds, and then you could put them in your field or your greenhouse and grow them on a big scale and make lots and lots of money. So that's tissue culture. Next ones we're going to look at are going to contain different hormones. Okay, let's have a look at a different plant hormone then. Let's look at ethene. So ethene is used in ripening fruit. We talked about how it's used with bananas, or sort of a side effect with bananas before, but that sort of power can be put to good use. So often, lots of our fruit, especially in the UK where our climate's not amazing, are flown in from other countries. So let's take something that's sold more this time of year, strawberries, nice summer fruit. So fruit could be grown somewhere like Spain or elsewhere in Europe, but if we picked it when it was ripe and then shipped it all the way to Britain, it would be really rotten by the time it got on our shelves. So the strawberries are picked just before they're ripe, when they're still green, then they're shipped over when they're green, then when they either are arriving in port or when they get to port, they are then sprayed with ethene, or a mixture containing ethene. What this will do is then promote those unripened strawberries to ripen up nicely, turn beautiful and red and delicious, just as they are hitting the shelves for you to go and buy. So the strawberries you see, especially if they've come from outside of the UK, have been ripened on arrival just to stop them rotting. Doesn't mean they taste any different though. I think all strawberries are beautiful, except the rotten ones. Our last plant hormone is gibberellins. So gibberellins can be used for a number of things as well. They promote seed germination, so you can grow plants sort of out of season, or you can sort of make your plants start to grow when you need them. They also start plants flowering, so similarly to the strawberry story we had a bit earlier, the flowers can be picked before they are opened, and then they use gibberellin to sort of make sure they open at the right time. So either when they're hitting the shops, or if they're being used in an event, have them open and beautiful just in time for the event, especially if they only have a very short flowering life. They can also be used to make fruit larger and promote fruit growth. So that would, of course, increase your profits if you're growing bigger fruit, so you can get more money for them potentially. So that's plant hormones and how they're used. Make sure you are able to sort of say what auxins do, their different uses, talk about fruit ripening, know what tissue culture is, know how cuttings are made, know how gibberellins are used, and know how ethene is used. Thanks so much for making it this far into the video. Hopefully the plant stuff hasn't put you to sleep, and you sort of will look at bananas in never the same way again, and keep them in a different bowl. That's my Misery's top tip for today. That is also the end of the homeostasis topic, especially if you're doing triple science. So now will be a good chance to maybe go back and pick up some videos of topics you didn't quite get, just to really reinforce that knowledge, and make sure you join us for another section of GCSE biology very soon.